Good morning. I'd like to call the Wednesday, October 14th State Board of Education meeting to order. All members are present. We do have two members on Zoom today. Jim McNeese and Jean Clifford are both attending via Zoom. All others are in attendance here in the boardroom. Would like to have approval of the agenda for today. So do we have a Dina moves to approve the agenda. We have a second. Vin Jones. All in favor, and Jim McNeese and Jean, you're going to need to make sure your picture's on so I can see you when we vote. Okay. Having a few technical difficulties for those of you listening. Jean Clifford approves the agenda. Okay, so she's having a little technical difficulties, and Jim McNeese, we have an unusual picture up. So I guess Peggy will, at this point in time, have an 8, I don't know how to say that we do that. Yeah, with Jean. So we do have approval. Okay, all right. Okay, well, good morning, and we'd like to, hopefully we get our, there's Jean. Okay, Jean's on. Okay, she's got her hand up. All right, good job, Jean, we got you. That's a 9-0 with Jean. Okay, all right, so we get our technical things, we'll kind of work through those here. And we'll move on to the first agenda item, which is agenda item number 4. And we are going to have a discussion item today, discuss the opportunities of micro-credentialing and individualized professional development for licensed teachers. So, Michelle, you're here today, and we've got a number of guests. Susan is here, but we've also got a couple on Zoom, so I'll let you introduce folks and get us started. So,
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board, Dr. Watson. I am pleased to be with you today to bring you a conversation that has been an ongoing topic with the Professional Standards Board, KSDE staff, and we've recently, it was March 5th the last time we had an opportunity to bring that group together, engage with other members across our state who have an interest in this topic and venturing into this world of micro-credentials. With me today, I have guests. I have Dean Debbie Mercer from K-State, who was Professional Standards Board Chair at the time we did our micro pilot. Dr. Paul Erickson, who is with us, a Bueller principal, to discuss his pilot work. And we also have Christy O'Borney. She's in the classroom today, so I'm hopeful she's able to engage with us, but let's give her a little grace if she's got kids running around in the background while she's trying to present with us as well. And I have my good friend Susan with me to talk about this topic as well. So the way we've broken this down for you all today is for us to take some time to talk about where we've been with our work on micro-credentials, where we feel we stand now, and some awesome opportunities that this could provide for education in Kansas. So the middle portion, Dean Mercer and Paul are going to talk about where we have been. We'll have Susan talk about where we are now, and Christy will talk about opportunities. And at the pleasure of the board, whether you want to hear the whole presentation and then ask questions, or whether you want to take time in between, we're flexible and can accommodate whatever needs you have. So with that, Paul, and I think I'm turning it over to you. We'll let you begin your work with the board, and thank you guys for taking time to be with us here today. And I'll click for you, Paul, if that's helpful.
Okay, yeah, that'd be helpful. And Debbie and I will tag team this section. So first of all, I want to say good morning to everyone. Good morning to the board and Dr. Watson and anyone else who may be in attendance. We're very excited to chat with you about micro-credentialing and its potential for teachers and students and maximizing our potential in education in Kansas. And we've been geeking out on this for 3, 4, 5 years. I don't know. What would you say, Debbie?
At least, yes.
Yeah, we've been geeking out with this on the Professional Standards Board for some time. It continues to evolve, and we're really excited and thankful that it continues to have energy. Many things in education, many important things in education right now can get lost because there is so much tension, and there is so many challenges to navigate. So to see micro-credentialing emerge as something that continues to be very important is super duper exciting for us, and we hope it is for you guys as well. Debbie, I can jump into the pilot, but if you want to give a little history on it behind with Professional Standards Board and your leadership there.
Absolutely, I'd be happy to set the stage. So Kansans Can Initiative charted a path forward for increased personalization of learning for students through individualized plans of study. And likewise, personalized professional learning for educators can be equally impactful. So the Professional Standards Board, as we mentioned, has studied this approach for the last few years, and they have defined a micro-credential as a personalized professional unit of study that is competency-based and results in a tangible credential. So again, this micro-credential initiative parallels the emphasis on personalization for students to personalization for educators. And we know that teacher voice in their own professional learning leads to greater efficacy and retention. So throughout the last few years, the Professional Standards Board has had presentations by vendors of micro-credentials, but perhaps what was most informative was a visit to Kettle Moraine School District in Wisconsin to learn how this innovative district implemented micro-credentialing district-wide. They actually did away with their historic salary schedule, and the only way to move on the salary schedule was through micro-credential completion. So learning could occur in a variety of formats. It could start with a book study or a conference or a graduate course, but the responsibility was put on the educator to demonstrate how that learning positively impacted students and how it positively impacted the district. And they also detailed how they leveled micro-credentials on the salary schedule into base editions of $200, $400, and $600 based on the complexity, rigor, and impact of learning. So personalization is a key component, and this personalization can occur at the individual level, the district level, or the state level. So as an educator, I could sit down with my building principal, my building leadership, and establish a personal goal of where they felt like I needed to grow or where I felt like I wanted to grow. Or it could be a district-wide initiative. The district could determine we're going to implement project-based learning as a pedagogical approach, and we want to work on learning that as an entire district. Or it could be a statewide initiative, such as suicide awareness or a specific aspect of dyslexia. So micro-credentials can be completed individually, in small groups, or system-wide. So groups might be grade level teachers or content area teams, interdisciplinary groups, or even groups across buildings and or districts. They're earned over time, typically embedded in classroom instruction, and result in a clearly defined competency. Feedback and evaluation are critical components and ensure that that learning is an ongoing process. And this can be completed through a locally controlled system similar to our current PDC councils. So Paul, I might turn it back to you so you can talk about the research that came out of that foundation set by the Standards Board.
Yep. And thanks, Debbie, for presenting that overview as to what micro-credentialing is and what it can be and how we might leverage this as a system. So where did this come from is always an important question. And it both answered in the research that I've led and worked with others. And really it's just the reality of our meetings and Professional Standards Board, in that we just continued to we continued to get hit by the challenge of a disconnect that was occurring between professional learning experiences and traditional relicensure efforts. And with the inspiration that redesign has given us in Kansas, we really landed on one, accepting that it's a dissatisfactory reality, and then having the encouragement to think of a different reality. And there's both in the surveys that we've completed on our research team, and the professional literature would support this, there is a disconnect between professional learning experiences and traditional relicensure, as well as traditional professional learning experiences and teacher satisfaction with that. And many times in the dissertation that I wrote, just continue to make connections back to KSDE and what we're looking in our vision for students in education in Kansas. And if our vision is to lead the world in success of each student, then let's start by leading the world in the success of each teacher. And we can make efforts toward the realization of that vision with projects like micro-credentialing and professional personalized learning. So in the 2016 to 2017 span, we researched micro-credentialing as that potential pathway toward teacher relicensure, developing a system that would support folks who would engage in the pilot, consultation with micro-credential developers, including Bloom Board, and a field visit to a pioneering district with micro-credentials in Kettle Moraine, Wisconsin. So after that research, and after taking intentional efforts to develop a system to deploy, we rallied 50 plus Kansas educators to initiate the process. In the beginning, we had over 50 folks that said, yes, I'm in. I'm willing to engage as a professional learner in personalized professional learning over the course of 3 semesters in order to earn relicensure for my next relicensure cycle. Folks earned that relicensure based on the completion of the pilot, which had a variety of requirements, but the biggest requirement was earning 2 micro-credentials, either those that were self-created and then accepted by our team, or packaged in the way of the Bloom Board micro-credentials that we were able to use. And that was done over the course of 3 semesters. So what were the results of all that? That's just, that was a picture of everybody getting in the game of this. But what's most important is, what was the scoreboard at the end of all this? What were the results? Well, we had 12 educators that developed their own micro-credentials during this process and completed them following the criteria set by us in PSB. We had 30 educators who completed and earned micro-credentials through Bloom Board. Not all the folks passed on that first attempt. Many were kicked back to them for revisions, just like teaching lessons in the classroom get kicked back to you by your students because they just don't work and result in maximizing student learning. Yet on that second attempt, all educators who completed those passed. 21 educators completed and earned 2 micro-credentials at the end of the pilot study, thus qualifying for relicensure. 6 who have completed the pilot have already relicensed solely based on these personalized professional learning efforts. They had completed their 2 micros, their cycle came up, and they relicensed based on this work. That's just 6 of the 21, so we have many still queued up to do this. But what's important for us to know as we talk about leading the world in success of each student is that we've started to lead the world in the success of each teacher as a personalized professional learner, and that of all the research we've completed and all the folks that we've talked to, and we've worked with several different states with their different micro-credentialing efforts, we're the only state that has recognized teachers with their relicensure solely based on personalized professional learning. That's big to me, because we can talk the talk of personalized professional learning or personalized learning for students, but you don't walk the walk until you assign a value to it. And we have assigned value to these efforts by granting teacher relicensure solely based on these efforts. You can go to the next slide. What's important to know is that this was really hard. 50% of folks who engaged in the pilot, were interested in the pilot, started the pilot, could not finish. Why couldn't they finish? They couldn't finish because it was too rigorous for them at that time. And people, this was voluntary. So we always allowed our participants an out, as we wanted it to be something that they had a ton of support to do. But if they felt like they couldn't complete as participants in any research project, they were granted the ability to decline. This was really hard. And that's good and that's bad. It's bad in that I wish more than 21 people would have completed the pilot, especially when we had over 50 that engaged in it at the beginning. But it's also good in that one of the primary concerns with us in the beginning of all this was, are micro-credentials rigorous enough for professional learning? Can we really ensure that the rigor is it is there for a whole system, for a whole state to rally around it? Because we can't rally around something that is too simple or too easy and doesn't yield in real results. Well, when 50% of people, over 50% of people are bailing on it, you know it is rigorous. And again, that was disappointing. At the same time, I don't know if you've ever been in a workshop where 50% of the people just walked out the back door because it was too hard. This is too hard. This is too rigorous. Okay, that doesn't happen normally because that's easy and that's comfortable and that's okay. But does it really yield high leverage learning in our teachers? It might not. So it's important to note that this is rigorous and this was business. It's also important to note that our goal here was to establish a relationship with personalized professional learning and efficacy. We know through the work of Hattie that self-efficacy and more importantly, collective efficacy are the two most impactful factors on student learning. It did enhance teachers' self-efficacy. It did enhance collective efficacy. And from the results that we gathered, people felt more confident in their teammates to get the job done. They felt more confident in their schools to get the job done. They began to develop a professional identity based on the competencies that they were developing. So those were just a few of the examples of those efficacious themes that manifested throughout the study. We can go to the next slide. So that's where we've been. Where do we want to stay? Where we want to stay is that we want professional development and teacher relicensure not to be one more thing to do, one more thing on the plate that is already overflowing. We want professional learning and teacher relicensure not to be one more thing. We want it to be one thing that does a lot more for them as learners and does a lot more for our kids in our schools.
Madam Chair, I know our time with you ends at 9:35, but before we skip on to the next section, it might be helpful for me to ask if you have any questions on Dean Mercer and Dr. Erickson's presentation so far.
Steve Roberts.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ultimately, do you see folks running the system, folks in the department, rather laying this out on what the requirements would be, or do you see this being as more teacher-led, that a professional educator will be essentially responsible for their own professional development?
Thank you. I think this is a place for both. I think this is a place where the professional educator could join in the conversation and say, I see myself having these needs. I'd like to personalize my path to professional development in this manner, and having that be a really collective conversation with leadership in that building. I think the state could join in that conversation and say, these are the things we want for all of our teachers in Kansas. And I think even at the local level, there might be some things that the school district would want. We talk about it right now as a three-way adventure, and I think you'll hear more about that conversation with Susan. So to answer your question, yes. Team, is there any more you would want to address on that? Thank you.
We have a couple more questions. Ann Ma.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Not having gone through this, I'm having a hard time visualizing what this looks like. Is this something you do on your own time? Do you go to a college and you're enrolling in a class? Do you go find a conference? I mean, and when you say it leads to a credential, what does that mean?
I think Susan's portion will cover some of that, but again, the answer is yes. I love that idea of, as you said, do I go find? I go find as a third grade teacher in Satana the things that are relative to me as a third grade teacher in Satana. May not be the same as a third grade teacher in Kansas City, Kansas, right? So I have the opportunity as a professional learner in a classroom setting, if you will, to find the pathway that works for me that might lead to, just as you said, a piece of paper that says, I'm a socially, emotionally credentialed candidate in Kansas, if you will. We're not to that detail yet. But more importantly, it leads to the piece that I think is most impactful for Susan, and you heard Paul and Debbie both talk about this, It leads to my license. My license is a gift in the end for the professional learning path that I took in the last 5 years to get there. I didn't just sit and get. I heard a few giggles about that 50% of folks leave during a large professional development event. I've planned those in my lifetime, and I know there were many who said, I wish I could have walked out during that one because it wasn't applicable to them. So the main purpose is to make learning as a professional educator applicable and impactful and lead toward that end of Kansas leading the world in the success of every student.
Because right now, the relicensure is based on having taken so many college credit hours, right?
It's
Like over 5 years? or
Sure,
something?
it's both depending on the level of license that you're looking for. I think it's really imperative that we say this is not an effort to take higher ed out of the picture. They have a very impactful portion of re-educating an educator, right? When you move from the classroom to a leadership, curriculum, technological support person, library media, those spaces won't change. However, the colleges, I think, could create some micro-credential opportunities. And it's a lot of those pieces that Mr. Porter and I talk about. Okay, I'm here with this work. How do I get over the hump and into the next space? And I think Susan will help us talk about that a little bit more, because the next piece is, at the very end of this, we would have to redo some professional learning regulatory requirements.
So at this point, the only credential is your relicensure?
At this point, yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
bet.
Madam Chair.
Dina Horst.
And I'll comment just a little bit on the facilitation of this for teachers. As personalized professional learning by nature can and should be to a large part asynchronous, and that people can leverage their own time and on their own time that learning experience. However, the rigor that teachers were facing in the pilot, they were not able to do that successfully. So as the facilitator of this, especially for the teachers in my building that were participating, I really had to carve out time for them during our master schedule, our master calendar for PD, et cetera, as they really needed that. And so many teachers did it in groups as well, that they really needed it built into our professional learning calendar. And we were able to do that on the fly. And it met their needs, both with the micro-credential, and it met our needs as a building and as a district as well, as far as our expectations for them in PD.
Dina Horst.
Thank you. I had about 3 questions, but kind of lost my train of thought when anyway.
You may have more as we go through this next section.
District committees, I can't think there's actually a term for them, but is there some similarity with the things that you do individually and get their approval? So will that still be a component, or is this going to be driven more by something from this professional development on the state level?
Again, the answer is yes. So the professional development councils at the local level will need to play a huge piece in this. And that's another piece that Mr. Porter and I talk a lot about, and Susan and I and the team as well. We're at a space where I'm kind of at a crossroads with this. I do X or I do Y. So I'm really gathering information from you all today to talk about where we go into the next steps. And I'm hopeful that as Susan starts to talk about that and where we are now, again, I am aware of your time as well, and I want to be sure that we honor you in that space too. So if it's okay, I'd like for Susan to go ahead and give you her portion on where we are, Madam Chair, and see if because that will spark many more questions as well. We may need a part 2 with you all.
Yeah, I think timing wise, as I look at the agenda, and I talked with the commissioner about this the other day, we do kind of have a hard time at 9:45 that we'll get on with the Kansas Teacher of the Year team. But Randy could make his comments at 9:35 after our break, so we could go till about 9:45. I do think we're going to have a lot of more questions. I've already got one on here, but let's go to Susan, and then Jim, we'll go to you.
Thank you.
For your question.
Okay. Taking the pilot results and continuing conversation with the Professional Standards Board and the work group that Michelle referenced, we did arrive at two critical pieces. The first is a definition. You heard Debbie read this. Personalized professional unit of study that is competency-based and results in a tangible credential. And as you heard Paul refer to, micro credential can be completed individually or as part of a small group or by a whole system. And some of those groups, you can see how they can be convened. The other critical piece then, moving on, were what are the components of a micro-credential? And here you see those because everybody's definition at one point of a micro-credential, everybody's defined it differently. But these were the components that said for it to be a real micro-credential, it has to have these pieces. So there has to be an overview. You heard Debbie refer to a literature review or perhaps taking a class, getting the knowledge background that you need, and then implementation over time, and then showing impact and results, and ultimately sharing those. And you'll see in a few slides how some of the questions around how those components, who would do that? Who would be responsible for that? So I think then one of the most critical things you heard Paul keep referring to this as a system. So it became apparent as discussions continued and as staff also had input at the national level, that micros aren't just for the purpose of relicensure, but they're the tool that can help us build a whole system in Kansas around professional or personalized professional learning. And that micro-credentials really can fit into all the different stages that an educator goes through. And these are the basic stages: pre-service, when you're learning how to teach, whether it be a traditional program or an alternative program. Then in your first 2 or 3 years as a beginning educator, moving on as an experienced educator, and then opportunities to, at the advanced level after you've been in the classroom, want to move on. So keeping those phases or stages in a career pathway, let's take a look at how micros might be used to build this system. So in pre-service, we know that there's micros around the professional ed standards that are the basis of any teacher preparation, again, whether it be an alt route or a traditional program. So universities, as they train, could utilize, have their candidates do micro-credentials to enhance those standards. At the beginning or novice educator stage, for example, we know that there's a set of micros offered by one of the big platforms that trains mentors. So there's a series of micros that make one bigger micro. That's an example of where that could be used. Again, there's packages of micro-credentials that help that beginning educator put the professional ed standards into practice. For example, if they're struggling with classroom management, having them do a micro on classroom management. Then as you move into the experienced educator and into the advanced stages of the career, the professional learning, this is what most people are focusing on for licensure renewal. And that was the emphasis of the pilot and much of our current efforts. And again, we all know that micros encourage the personalized learning and add value to the professional development. You've heard that spoken of already today. And then think about it as a means of providing evidence that you've gained competencies in specific areas. And that fits in with professional advancement or career pathways also. So micros, you can use it as a means to verify, for example, that you've done micros on, say, dyslexia. And so your district can recognize that you've done this, you've documented the micro is evidence of that competency-based learning, so they can use you in whatever means that they feel appropriate as a result of that competency. Professional advancement, why not? Students have individual, yeah. So why not think of this as that for teachers? So if somebody says, down the road, I really want to be a teacher leader, there's micro-credentials on teacher leadership skills. So why not plan ahead and start building your competency? So again, thinking of a system across a continuum and how the micros can fit in each of those areas. And then this slide, let's just concentrate briefly on the professional learning related to licensure. So currently, somebody asked this, we do have a system, you renew your license based on professional development points. And those points can be earned from credit hours or from other personal learning activities. We also have currently in our regs a system of awarding extra points for someone who says, I learned this, then I took it to an application level, and not only that, I can prove it had impact. So when you think about micros, that what you've learned about micros today, it's really doing that. It's taking learning to application and impact. So within our current system related to license renewal, the District Professional Development Council can go ahead and award points for micros. So they can fit into the current system. And it parallels what we were trying to do with the current regs of building that application and impact. So then moving forward on professional learning, parallel work that we've been doing is all related to building the next system of professional learning in Kansas and how that relates to licensure renewal. So we had a PD task force a few years ago that made some recommendations. And since that point, we've been trying to say, how can we implement those recommendations and how does that tie to micro-credentials? And when we started looking at micro-credentials, it was the glue or the tool that allowed us to bring all of this together. So the task force, the main thing was that we're changing the paradigm from you do professional learning to renew your license to you do professional learning because it is, as an educator, it's continuous improvement, continuous growth, and my license renewal is a side effect. So our next iteration of licensure that supports all of this, we've been trying to build a system that would say professional learning for renewal of your license falls into 3 buckets. Your individual personalized professional learning that helps you meet your building and district goals, and those would be really job-embedded professional learning. It's almost a check-off that you participated in your building activities, you fill that bucket. And then building into it a state goal, something that you as the state board would say, we want all of our educators in the state in the next 5 years to learn about this. So as you can see, hopefully, micros could serve to meet all these buckets of professional learning. So why not, if you say dyslexia over the next 5 years, we want all of our educators, possibility of creating a micro around dyslexia. And then we've actually already been working with the Regulations Committee to help us redefine and move us forward on this professional learning vision for the future. So that was just the professional learning piece and how micros could fit into that. Okay, other ongoing considerations about micros, and this is kind of what has held us back a little bit. First of all, and probably foremost, we do have to finalize what does the state of Kansas want to do? How do we want to use it? For what purposes? So do we just want to say they're related to professional learning, or do we want to think about all of those stages and build a system where they could have leverage at all phases of an educator's professional continuum? And then capacity is the big one. What capacity does the state have versus the local level? Thinking about the components, who approves and who says, yes, this is a good micro, who looks at the impact and the sharing, all of those pieces of the components. And then we have to talk about those different levels of micros. What Debbie referred to when we went to Kettle Moraine as the $200, $400, and $600 worth. So how, who does that? How do we evaluate that? There has to be a communication plan back to the districts as we transition into this, whatever we decide. And then obviously procedural steps. And then finally, the last stage would be ultimately regulation changes and transition plans. Do you want to introduce?
Sure.
So-
Why don't we go ahead and do the opportunities? We've
That'd be
got
great.
questions lining up, but
Thank
is
you.
this the last presentation?
Yeah, I appreciate that. This is Christy's opportunity to share with you some opportunities that are available now. And I want to honor her time in the classroom. Thanks for being with us, Christy.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yes, I had to move mountains to be able to attend this. Thus, I'm in the back room of my library right now while my class is being supervised by our counselor. Team effort. So as far as the platforms go, some opportunities we already, some things that are already out there for people to use. We've talked about Digital Promise already. So back in 2014, Digital Promise launched micro-credentials for pre-K to 12 educators. And Bloomboard is one that was brought up already. That's another platform that has been used. That's the one the pilot program at the that we were talking about used was through Bloomboard if they didn't do a self-created one. But Digital Promise, I think, is one of the most well-known ones. And Digital Promise is actually the one that NEA has partnered with. So all the ones that NEA uses goes through the ecosystem of Digital Promise. And so NEA decided that they wanted to start working with Digital Promise to help develop some micro-credentials and to help house where they're keeping theirs. So this slide right here shows what the landing page, Kansas NEA now has their own landing page for micro-credentials that anyone is able to use. So this is where you would go. This is also where you would, the micro-credential badges are housed, and the place that shows all of the stacks and micro-credentials, individual micro-credentials that are available through NEA. I'm going to speak to the NEA ones because those are the ones I'm most familiar with. I did create one through Bloomboard. They are very similar in how the platforms look. But what is really special about the NEA ones is that they are created by educators for educators. They're peer reviewed. I've already talked about how they have a partnership with Digital Promise. As of right now, they have 29 different stacks. Those fall into all sorts of different categories, like social emotional, trauma informed, through just about anything you can think of with education. There's a stack created for that through NEA. And within each of those stacks are the individual micro-credentials. So all total, as of right now, they have about 177 and counting. Let's see what else. So when you actually go into, somebody had asked what this actually looks like to give you more of a visual of what an NEA one would look like. When you go into our site, on the left-hand side here, this is what I'm talking about. Classroom management is an example of a stack that's created. And underneath that stack, it shows you here, there's 6 micro-credentials. What I love about these two is it also gives you an overview of about how many hours they say each of them might take to actually do. And then underneath the stacks are the individual micro-credentials that are listed. So you see those little badges there, addressing challenging behaviors. That would be one micro-credential. Aspects of an engaged classroom is one. And so when you actually click on the view PDF, to the right there, you see this would be like the syllabus that you would follow. It gives you, lays everything out for you that you would need. It gives you research links that you can follow. It gives you an overview of the components for it. It gives you all the rubrics that you would need, so you know what your target is, you know what the expectation is. Even before you commit to doing it, you can go through and use these. And just personally, I love these because even if I don't necessarily want to do a full micro-credential, I can access these and get some excellent research and some excellent places for information that I might just be needing for other things in my classroom. I have completed 7 through NEA. I completed 1 through Bloomboard. As far as micro-credential goes. And as far as Kansas goes, we are very fortunate because when we talk about, as of right now, somebody had asked, like, what is the actual tangible thing we have in Kansas right now? So yes, we did the pilot where some teachers were able to relicense, but through, if you're a KNEA member, if you do a micro-credential, you have the opportunity to also have that equal a graduate credit through Baker. Because we have a MOU with them right now that these are all eligible for a graduate level credit for that. But I want to reiterate too that micro-credentials are things that can be used within our current professional development system because they take everything. It's not just knowledge, it takes it to application and it takes it to impact within the classroom. And that is what I have found so valuable, is that if it's something I know I need help with, or I want to learn more about, or I want to try, it gives me the things I need, the tools I need to implement something in my classroom, see right away what's working, what's not. It forces me to do some of that reflection. I turn it into somebody, and if they feel like, work on this or that part, I get the information, the feedback right away. And if not, and it works well and I feel good about it, I get the extra yay bonus. I'm micro-credentialed in that competency now. So I feel like I just spouted a lot really fast, and I'm sorry.
It's okay.
But
Thanks,
that is
Christy.
the end of my part.
Thank you, and we won't be bothered if you need to step back to your kiddos. So that's a lot. That was a lot in 30 minutes. I hope you feel where we have kind of been and that we do have a plan for continuing to move forward. One of the things that we've not discussed and need to talk about is there is some expense involved. Systems would have to invest in a platform or create opportunities for an electronic platform, but please hear what Paul said too. You can do this individually on your own. Debbie and I are teaching in the same space and we want to learn more about the social emotional needs of our kids. We can do that together and be given an award for that opportunity together. Paul, I know, continues to create those opportunities with his staff now. I hope you can also see we have work to do yet in this area. And in the remaining 2 minutes, I'm happy to have us all stand for questions.
First of all, Christy, thank you for taking time away from your kids. We know that's moving mountains, so we really do appreciate you taking your time. Paul, thank you for your work also, and Debbie, thank you. We appreciate the support and the information. We do have a number of questions, but I think we're going to be pretty much out of time pretty quick. So, and I know we've got, like I say, a hard time as far as the phone call. So we may have to come back to questions.
I'm happy to come back and visit with you all.
Yep, we are too.
So Jim Porter's got something he'd like to say. You've got about 30 seconds.
Well,
Jim.
and I have several questions, and I'll send them to you, but the
Okay.
fact, for a period of time, I would urge us, this is important, I've been pushing this for years. I think it is an answer to a whole lot of things, because I've planned professional development activities that I wanted to walk out on, and I know, and this I see as a way to make sure that we are giving teachers the opportunity to learn what they need to learn, and they know what they need to learn. So I would urge us at this time, which was time, I know the time is out, to schedule this again next month.
Yes, sir.
So that we can continue this discussion. And I'll send you the questions, that's
you.
all I need to say.
Okay, I think we'll do that because I know we need to get on to our 9:45. So again, thanks to everybody
Thanks,
that
team.
joined us online. and Michelle and Susan here in the boardroom. So
You bet. Thank you very much. And I want to point out that Christy has done 7 micro credentials. 7. I mean, we had people bailing after one because of the rigor. So she is officially our state champion of personalized professional learning. She has the title belt. So
she's a rock star.
big time, Christy.
Yeah, way to go.
Thank you all.
Okay, well, looks like some of our other folks are already on. Hooray. Hello, everybody else. We'll wait just a second and let some folks get off and more folks get on.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, people are just popping on like crazy. Hello, people. Welcome, welcome.
Good morning.
Happy Wednesday. I thought it was Tuesday for about 30 minutes this morning.
This is a time of year that gets a little bit confusing. I'm kind of like, okay, what day of the week is this? Yes.
Yes.
Okay, well, we're really glad to have you guys, even though it's remotely. We really appreciate you taking some time. We know you're all busy people. So we appreciate you taking some time. We really want to have you have a little discussion with us about the impact that COVID-19 is having on your classroom. We know it's having impact. We certainly have seen that from our level, but we'd like to hear from you. So it's just an opportunity for us to hear some conversations that you guys have. And I might just start it off with a question. And as you come up, I know we've seen you all, but reintroduce yourselves to the board, and we'll get started there. So just from a teacher perspective, how has the pandemic impacted your teaching? So, well, what we see up there will be different than how they see us.
You're gonna have to call.
Okay, well, let's start with Tabitha. I'll pick on you, Tabitha.
You know, so we actually have a little something prepared to talk to you about, if that's okay.
That's great. Yeah, that'd be fine.
And it's going to answer this question
Okay, super.
and maybe some more of those. So
I'm not
I will turn it
surprised.
over
You
then.
have something prepared.
This will take about 10 minutes probably of your time. So we'll do that. We'll do this and that will answer your question. Melissa, are you here?
She's on here, Tab, but she's not showing she has audio attached or a picture.
Okay, let's just go to Sean then and have him go, and then we'll move down the list and add her again.
Okay, just to reintroduce myself, I'm Sean Horning. I teach high school at Wamego High School and part of the Region 1 Teacher of the Year team with Stephanie Lane, my partner in crime there in Clay Center. And my passion, if you will, is community, and how do we define our learning communities and how do we expand those? And that's something that we will touch on, is how the pandemic has affected our communities. So with that, I'll pass the introduction baton. I forget who was next. Steph?
Kara.
Kara.
Hello, I am Kara Ballou, and I teach at Andover Central High School in Region 4. We're currently in a hybrid, and so that has been challenging and rewarding. So we can talk about that later. And I am really excited to be here today. Thank you for the opportunity.
Hi, I am Julie Levenstein, and I teach 4th grade in the Basler Linwood School District. My passion this year that I've spoke about has been relationships, keeping yourself in a positive relationship, the team of teachers in a positive relationship, as well as the relationship with your students. Since COVID, I have also talked about that relationship with parents, because that has been always important, but ever present and very important at this point in time. And we'll get more into that just a little bit later.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for having us here and giving us the time to just kind of hear our voices this morning. My name is Stephanie Lane, and I am from Region 1, Clay Center, Kansas. I teach fourth grade here, and we are back in the classroom full time with students and staff. So everyone is at school every day. We do offer remote learning for some of our students, and we probably have 7 to 20 students in each building utilizing that. My biggest passion throughout our time traveling together is creating a culture of positivity, of resilience, and of love within my classroom. And this year it's focusing on more within our whole building as a staff and building each other up to support our collective efficacy.
And then Melissa, why don't you jump in since there you are?
Am I finally on? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thanks for having us. I'm Melissa from Region 3, Shawnee Mission. I teach remotely at Corinth Elementary, and my focus on this journey has been highlighting the power of student choice in the classroom. It's been such an honor to represent teachers in Kansas and to experience traveling, learning, reflecting with these dynamic educators that are here today. They've become lifelong friends, and I cannot thank you enough for connecting us and supporting the Outstanding Teacher of the Year program. I also wanted to mention one of our teammates is not with us this morning, our friend Laura McDonald from Topeka. She's a passionate middle school teacher who works tirelessly to engage students. She encourages their social activism. Her kindness club that she sponsors has brought students together and reaches the most vulnerable in her school. She's been an outspoken voice for teachers in Kansas, and her sense of humor and depth of character have left just an indelible mark on this group. So thank you for inviting us to share.
And I'm Tabitha Rossbroy, 2020 National Teacher of the Year. It's me. And I am from Winfield and teach preschool there, but I'm on sabbatical this year. I'm not in the classroom. Melissa, if you want to mute your mic, I think it's there we go. Okay. And our school system is in person 5 days a week right now. Our cases are rising a little bit, and I think we're moving towards hybrid if that happens. But we're hoping that it doesn't. And so I'm going to turn it over to Amy, who will introduce herself now, and we will definitely be answering that question. Leave it to us to be a little artistic in the realm of giving you a glimpse of our year and answering some of these questions. But we prepared a little something for you, and then we will definitely do Q&A after. So thanks for letting us do this.
Good morning, and of course, I'm in the classroom, and in the background, you hear my phone ringing. That's right. Good morning. I am Amy Hillman out of Olathe, USD 233. I represent Region 3 Secondary on the 2020 K-TOY team. And my passion term is engagement. Whether it's engagement in our classrooms live or whether it's engagement when we are remote and even a little bit of hybrid. I wish to start off by saying thank you. This year has pushed and pulled each of us to new incredible limits, some inspiring and some that have challenged even the strongest of us. Now, even though I'm a complete science geek, and I am, I do love thinking of our world in symbols. One of my avid students this year wrote a note about the rose and its thorns that represents 2020. I loved this analogy to represent our journey here with K-TOY team. This team, one that will forever be my connected family. 2020 brought us many beautiful roses for this team of teachers as we traveled, we spoke, and most importantly, connected with educators across our beautiful state. With each stop on our tour, we met and heard the voice of educators. You know, those that are believers in the power of education. These roses reminded each of us of the value we must place on our educators across Kansas. Now, the team spent the majority of our time with our new educators, connecting them to what promises to be an impactful career that can and it will change the lives right here in Kansas. We made it a point to reach out and intentionally make our message to these young educators that they have a state, a common community that believes in what they do and just how powerful they will be. Now, a personal rose for me this year had to be seeing our beautiful and diverse state. I am not a born and raised Kansan, but I could not be more proud of the beauty and innovation our state has to offer. From the Flint Hills to the yellow brick road of Wamego, from the lights of Kansas City to the farms of Dodge. I have always known of the beauty, but now I have seen the beauty. Well, in middle March, we felt our first thorn. Our state was doing the responsible thing and shutting our schools due to this invisible beast, COVID-19. It was the right call, but this hurt. The thorns cut as we no longer could continue our visits to the remaining colleges and schools planned. The thorns cut as the numbers rose, not only in our state, y'all, but this sickness was hurting and killing our fellow Americans and those around the globe. The thorns cut as we educators from across our state, well, we cried as we could not guide our learners to their next steps for fourth quarter. Hearts were broken, and these dedicated educators were steeped in worry for all of their scholars. Oh man, but then there were roses. Our team was asked by Randy Watson and Tabitha, our National Teacher of the Year, Rose, to jump in and help create a guide for our state and how to deliver and connect Kansan students to learning in this unprecedented time. And of course, we answered that call. Our team stepped up and became voices and teachers on this continuous learning guide, and other initiatives for our local districts. And a few of us enjoyed the opportunity to teach with our local Kansas PBS stations. That's right, learning across Kansas. These roses pushed each of us on the team to think differently, create learning with a different mindset, and to rise to what was needed and necessary for our Kansas learners. And y'all, it was a blast. Now my middle school, Santa Fe Trail, right here in Olathe. You see, my families have felt both roses and thorns, and maybe a few blooms, as they have endured through this time of Corona. Most of my families are the exact essential workers that have been on the front lines from day one. Some have become sick. We have lost a few. These thorns have cut deeply as my middle school level students have had to step up and not only manage their learning, but the day-to-day responsibilities, you see, of their younger siblings. Why? Because that's what families do. I am reminded of the realities of my 6th and 8th graders as I watch them on Zoom, passing a baby sibling from one lap to the other. Never losing patience, but doing what's necessary. This is not a rose and it's not a thorn. This is what I would call a bloom. My young learners are making it work, showing their grit and teaching each of us the power of positive mindset. Oh, and that get her done mentality. Okay, now this is a funny note. Only in these times of Zoom and these Zoom meetings would we ever hear things like, Jeremy, dear, could you please take the hamster off of your face while we read together? Thanks. Or, Mrs. Hillman, can I go announce to the family that I'm on Zoom after the revealing incident yesterday? Oh yes, these moments are happening in all of our classrooms, and it does bring a little humor. As a K-Toy team, we never stopped connecting during these months, and I'm guessing these 8 people that were chosen by their peers and their communities to be placed together during this very moment will be a forever family. Now, no matter the roses or the thorns that come into our world, this incredible team of humans will always rise to the challenge and always push one another to create the greatest impact, you see? With roses and thorns, there must always be buds of hope. These buds are why we do what we do as educators, you see? There's always hope. There's hope in the darkest moments. There's hope in the most divisive moments. And there's even hope in the most quiet of moments. We have hope that each Kansas scholar knows how powerful they can be, that each scholar knows that they can and will be accepted for their beautiful, diverse self. That we in Kansas education know the value of our teachers, y'all, and that they know that they are changing the world one scholar at a time. You see, we have hope. Thank you for continuing to support this K-12 experience. This program is spreading the word that Kansas is indeed the place to educate. And y'all, you see, our voice has gone national. Congrats to our national rose, Mrs. Tabitha Rossbroy. Thank you, and team, get ready. Keep connecting. Tabitha?
Thank you, Amy. Every time, like, I would come to your church, Amy. That's what I would do. I feel like everything you say is meant exactly for me to hear. You know, in the light of that beautiful picture that Amy has created, we want to share with you some of our own personal roses and our thorns and our buds, which I think is the direction you are going for in those questioning. You know, the thorn, what have our struggles been? What is some growth that has already happened, and what do we hope for in the future? And I'm going to let Melissa start us off.
Okay, well, we're sharing our thorns, roses, and buds. So my personal thorns include navigating this evolving teaching profession this year amongst the pandemic, while also caring for an elderly parent and also raising my own children. My rose has to be the opportunity my district gave me to choose whether I wanted to teach remotely or not. And while this was such a challenging decision and not working with students in person, I have embraced the challenge, and I feel safe and supported and valued by my district and my colleagues. And my bud for hope is for the future that we would emerge from this crisis as a more adaptive and more creative group of professionals. And I feel like we're more prepared to tackle challenges coming down the road in our field.
Sean, you're up.
All right. Thanks again for this opportunity. And thinking about the challenges and the blooms and the buds, the bloom, I think, looking back on this experience, was it really forced us to all think about how we think. It forced us to learn about how we learn, and really kind of not take things for granted, and find out ways to be safe, to physically distance, but to really maintain community and make sure that we're looking out for each other during this time. And I was really proud of our community. We were able to get every student on Wi-Fi and get them laptops, but that's not the experience for everybody. So equity is a huge issue that we will address and need to address. Thorns, you know, this isn't a 9-to-5 job, and you always take it home with you. I think now, having been exposed to even more of our students' home lives, I think it's harder in some ways, because you feel like you're never able to do enough. And so that's one of the big challenges, I think, is to find ways to make sure that our students, our learners, our families, our community are getting what they need. And but the bud of hope, I think, for us is it really has made us address what we value, who we want to be, how we think, how we want to learn, the opportunities. So when we come out of this, we jumped on the redesign, and it's one of the things that bringing the students in, one of the students said, I finally feel like my education is mine, and really thinking about how we think, how we learn, how we define communities. So there's a lot of hope that's budding up. So thank you again for letting us have this opportunity to talk a little bit about our schools. And right now, I didn't mention, we are full-time And we're also trying to synchronously work with our remote learners. So that's been a very big challenge, is how to do both and do both well and do both justice. So thanks again.
Good morning. My name is Kara Ballou, and as I reflect on our current challenges, the thorn that I just can't quite get out of my paw is the loss of goodbyes at the end of the school year and the traditions then and this fall. So we as a K-Toy team spent the majority of third quarter on the road, and I was looking forward to more time in my classroom. One of the things I love about high schools is they have rhythms with homecoming and prom and graduation and art and music festivals, athletics, academic competitions, and so many more things. We've lost many of those in deference to the severe threat of COVID-19. Our students are resilient and they understand, but there is still loss. Through the risk of all those thorns comes the beauty of the rose garden, though. So when we look carefully, I see some teachers blooming. We're collaborating in our buildings and beyond, revising lesson plans, innovating with new technologies. My students are teaching me all kinds of things, and I'd like to think I'm teaching them a few things as well. Some say they will emerge as better teachers after this experience. Is it challenging? Yes, absolutely. And the struggles are very, very real. We're tired because we're trying so hard to overcome the barriers of remote, hybrid, or physically distanced learning. Yet as teachers, we adapt because we love what we do, and we love the students that we do it for. My hope and that rosebud is eternal. Our nation has seen challenges in the past. The Civil War spurred the Industrial Revolution. World War I prompted the Roaring '20s. The Depression and World War II gave us a generation that fundamentally changed America and the world, and now is our time. I believe this generation is internalizing this struggle and making plans for a better tomorrow. They are so inspiring. My high school students know the struggles of the world today, and they have creative ideas on how to make progress. They fundamentally understand the power of their generation, not just in numbers, but in energy, in innovation, and change. And I see the future every day in my classroom, and the future is bright. Young people across America are stepping up to lead, and leadership has been my passion and my passion word for the K-Toy year. So I encourage you to let them inspire you. Include them on initiatives as I've seen in the spring, involving education and other issues, and letting them affect their peers. So one more, rose for me was that all of my seniors passed government, all of them. And that was a 4-hour Zoom call on Sunday before Monday when everything had to be done. But I didn't give them grades. They earned them all. And I am so proud of them. So I'll move on.
All right, I believe I am next. I am Julie Levenstein, and I also did not share, I believe at the very beginning, that in my school, in the elementary school at 4th grade, we are in the building Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday, and we do remote learning on Wednesdays. So because we do need to express our thorns, they're a part of a rose. Mine has been the mental health of teachers. And so often we talk about the mental health of our students, but right now what's really concerning is the mental health of our teachers, and especially our veteran teachers. Those who've poured their lives into this career and this profession all of their years. They've worked above and beyond their whole career, and now they are feeling that it still is not enough and that more is expected of them, and they're not having the appreciation that maybe they felt that they received in other times. I've seen teachers in tears talk about leaving the profession, and they're exhausted. So that for me is the most painful thorn right now. But this year, as unexpected as it is, also has so much beauty in it, and that's the rose, and beauty in unexpected ways. So for me, the rose has continued to be those relationships and the connections that have been made and are unique to 2020. So through the years, I have found the ways that to form these connections and these relationships that have worked and been successful. However, now I have found that myself and teachers have learned to make these connections in ways that are more profound and protected than probably ever before. So I have a quick story to share that I shared earlier in the week with my K-Toy team. I have a student in my class with others that has very little parent support and also has special education needs. So we had worked for weeks to try to teach this student how to Zoom with us on our remote Wednesdays and trying to get him to understand how to do that on his own. Well, he missed the first 3 weeks. We continued to work with him. But last week, there was his face on our Zoom meeting as the biggest smile ever. And the next morning, when he came into my class, he greeted me at the door with his mask on. I could see the biggest smile ever underneath that mask. And he said, "Mrs. Levenstein, was the best part of your day yesterday seeing me on Zoom?" And I know he could see underneath my mask, my huge smile, and probably those tears in my eyes that said, "Yes, buddy, it absolutely was the best part." So for me, that rose is, and that bloom is that the connections are still being made and lives are still being made to feel that they are important in our classes. So amongst those are the buds, and that's the hope that we see. And one that I see right now is that the educators, along with the Board of Education and our Department of Education, is working together to have the opportunity to truly redesign our students' lives. So we use that word a lot in Kansas, but now it's more important and more impactful than ever before. So we've had the chance to look at ways to successfully redesign how to reach each of our students at school, but now at home also. And we have the chance to not just have social and emotional learning and programs in our school, but to actually use them to effectively reach our students. We have the ability to support our teachers in ways that we've never done before. And those roses will always be beautiful. They'll always have thorns, and they'll always have buds. So now's the time to nurture those rosebuds and see the beauty that we can create in our state. Thank you for allowing me to be a part of that process.
Thanks, Julie. Good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Stephanie Lane from Clay Center. So just kind of jumping in real quick. I'm sure you guys have more questions and things on your agenda. My personal thorn to talk about would probably be, and I feel like I can't say this enough, trauma is still occurring in our classrooms, even with COVID. COVID already, regardless of how you feel about it and masks and all of that, I think we can all agree it's a lot on our economy, a lot on our world, a lot on our health system. But on top of that, we're still having our students and our teachers experience their normal day-to-day trauma. And everyone is stretched thin and everyone is tired, but we're all doing our best. And I think that's where those little buds come in, is that that collective efficacy is spreading now from just that staff down into our classrooms, and our students are holding up these roles that they've never held before. They're showing so much resilience and so much civic duty at a young age, because at least in Clay Center, my students are really understanding that it's their job to wear a mask to take care of those in their community. And if we choose not to wear a mask, then unfortunately our school might close down or our grandparents might get sick. And in Clay Center, a majority of our students live with their grandparents or live with elderly people. And so we're really teaching this as more of a civic duty, something that we do to ensure those around us are safe. The bloom or the rose from all of this, for me, I think is just the appreciation for school and for classmates and for school lunch, like the little things. I was walking through the cafeteria and I had a student, he was slamming his hot ham and grilled cheese on his tray, which I'm sure most of us can remember from our elementary days. That sandwich is hard, and just smacking it. And he's like, "Mrs. Lane, look at this sandwich." I'm like, "Oh, buddy, I'm so sorry." And he says, "That's okay. I'd rather be here eating it than at home." And I'm like, "Man, I'm glad you're here. I love that attitude." So I think from all of this, this, we can take away the fact that we're appreciating new things than we ever have before. Another rose for me was I actually had a baby during COVID, and I had so much support from this K-Toy family, which was huge because I didn't even let my own parents around. We were very safe and very protective, making sure we have 2 little girls, were staying healthy. And 4 days into school, I hit a thorn and my whole family got COVID. And that was pretty tough because we are mask wearers. We do not go anywhere but the grocery store, and that's one person at a time. And I just think, you know, these things happen, but if we take all of the negative that's going on in our lives and we find ways to shift it into positive ways, we can spread that positive and love to not only our students and our faculty, but our whole community. Thank you so much. Tabitha?
Yeah, so I'm not in the classroom this year, but one big bloom rose that I saw out of the spring was absolutely the support I was able to provide to families in a new way. And it really, I really moved from student instruction to family coaching. And I think that families are something I've always been super passionate about. And so this was just a huge way to get to impact that. And I grew really close to those families. But some of the thorns that we're facing right now, have you ever tried to fit a tent back into a tent bag? You know, like you're just like punching it and rolling it up, will never go in. It will never go in like it was supposed to. And that's what we're facing with education right now. We are trying to make remote learning and hybrid learning too much like what it was in the classroom. And the thorn is that it's wearing our teachers out, it's wearing our families out, and it's wearing our kids out. So my hope for the future in this is that as policymakers, as people at the state level, that maybe we'll collaborate with people who are remote teachers full-time. May's virtual school, you know, that's one that comes to my head. Those people are experts at that kind of instruction full-time. And I think that our remote learning should look more like that. And so I don't know, I'm hopeful for collaboration. I am hopeful for connection. And I love that in a way, being virtual has made our world smaller and has provided some of us with those opportunities. But I do think that's one of the main challenges that we're facing. And I'm just gonna nip it there because I'll talk more in a minute and I'm gonna pass it back to Amy.
Well, part of what I really wanted to make sure that you guys realize that you heard my spiel, you know my vibe, but the fact is that engagement still is essential. My passion word of engagement is that, yeah, you know, countering what Tabitha just said, it's going to look different when we're 2-dimensional on these computers. But the fact is, man, our teachers are doing it. They're bringing their best selves, and we have to believe that. And to complement what Kara was talking about, there is more collaboration going on. Those buds and those blooms that are happening, teachers are having conversation with people they've never met before, and they're trusting them. And they were right down the hallway. We have to do this to make sure our students are provided with all that they need. Now, Tabitha is going to go on forward and talk about our charging, our marching orders. And that's right, some 3 things that we are very passionate about on this team that I do believe we're going to need the board to help us with, to launch, to protect, and to provide. So Tabitha, I'm volleying it back to you, dear. Get them.
So you've heard our stories and our thorns and our flowers and our buds. They've been laid out here. So many people say, listen to teachers. And we know in Kansas that we have something more. We have a board that's not only willing to listen, but to be responsive to what they've heard. So we know that our time with you today was meaningful and important. As educators try to hit this sort of ever-moving target during the pandemic, here's what we need from our state board, from our policymakers, from anybody who will listen. We need you to back up every equity initiative that's brought to you by communities in need. We know this pandemic has been the magnifying glass on inequities that have forever been present in our communities. And lack of technology and internet are not the only inequities that this pandemic has spotlighted. There is so much social inequity involved too, and schools are working to address those things. We also need you to show educators and school staff that we are just as valued as frontline workers and our friend Patrick Mahomes in the NFL. Help us create a space we know is safe to work in by doing things like pushing for frequent and intentional COVID testing in our schools. Show us that our lives are just as valuable as the other frontline workers. And finally, we need all of the people who can to push for more funding into mental health counseling and services for our students and staff. We need help supporting our students not only at school, but in their homes. And remember that when we come out of this pandemic, things aren't magically going to go back to normal, and we'll need to be ready. Our journey as a K-TOY team was cut short, but we're still here. We're still part of this team, and we want to help you in the coming months. We hope that you continue to use educator-led initiatives and task forces to address the issues that are still coming, and just know that we'll be the first to volunteer. Thank you so much.
Well, K-Toy team is usually hit it out of the park. I love the roses and the thorns and the buds. That was very good way to really describe what's going on right now. I really thank you for your charges. I wrote them all down, and I think we need to come back to those. One of the things, and I haven't talked to the commissioner about this, once we're whatever through COVID looks like, I'm not sure what that's going to look like, but once we're there, I'd really like your team to come back, and we can have maybe it will actually be in person then, and we can have a conversation about what have we learned out of this and what do we need to take forward, because I think we can learn some lessons and there can be some things that we can move forward from our experience that we've learned now that will help improve our educational system even more. So I would like to invite you back. I've got a few questions from some of my colleagues, so I'm going to turn to them and let them ask some questions. So Jim Porter?
Really don't have any questions. I want to tell you how impressed I am with all of you and how much I appreciate. I heard the charges. I agree with our chair that we need to address those immediately. I know that you're a family and that you support each other as a family, so I would urge all of you to work and try to bring Amy out of her shell.
Okay. We've been trying all year, Jim. Useless.
Janet Wall?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Wow, that was amazing. I am so impressed. Thank you, thank you, thank you. But the one thing that really resonated with me, because I have seen this, I've heard about this, is the mental health issue. And I recognize how difficult this is, particularly with our staff. And one of the things I'm seeing with our staff that I think is creating a lot of problems is, frankly, they're working unbelievable hours. I mean, I've heard of teachers putting in 12, 14 hours a day, including weekends. And I guess my question to you, if you could answer it, is there anything we can do to help with this? Because to me, this is one of the biggest issues with our staff and our students, but is there anything we can do right now to kind of help improve this thing?
This is very tricky. I'm going to comment again and just reiterate, I think some of our expectations need to be adjusted. I live half a mile from my school and I'm not there. I'm National Teacher of the Year, and that is a hard job, but it is not as hard as what is going on in the schools. I see teachers there all night, every night, 11 p.m. on Sundays, 9 a.m. on Saturdays. They're there, they're working, they're trying to get this done. It's too much. It's too much to juggle. It's not sustainable. I don't exactly know what needs to be adjusted, but I think that we need to give permission to our administrators locally to say, look at your seat time. Can we adjust this at all? Can we make this look different? How can we take some of this load off of you in this balancing? It is a huge job to balance just a classroom. And now add on hybrid, add on synchronous learning. That's 2 full-time jobs. It really is. So we need to look at our resources differently. And I think we need to look at what our expectation is. This is still a pandemic. The spring felt good and wonderful and like people were supporting educators, but right now everybody's suffering. And I think that we sort of still need to remember we're still in this pandemic. So it would be okay if things looked a little bit different.
And I also just add something real quick on that. Because our school, and mine, as I said, has our students in 4 days, and we are out doing remote teaching one day. One thing, we've had our share of problems also, like all districts. I mean, we continue to have challenges and struggles like all districts. But something that has helped that I know is a financial piece is in order to get those numbers down and not have teachers teaching remotely and in the classroom, they did hire an elementary remote teacher for every grade level. That's a financial issue, but ours did pull any teacher in our school that was having other jobs that had full-time, that did have a certified teaching certificate into the classroom if they were willing to do that. And that kept our numbers down and it kept our teachers from doing both jobs. And that has been a lifesaver for a lot of that mental health for our teachers.
And if I could just add, and you saw JJ come in, that's my administrator. Here's what I'm going to say. He and his team stop in every day to check on us. They have a conversation with us. They look in our eyes. Today just happens to be a day that he drops off treats. That's right. We would not be the same without you. But it's not the little things such as this that keep us going. The fact is that JJ felt empowered because of what we're doing with redesign to actually design our school building, what was good for kids first, and then what could support our teachers next. And yeah, it looked weird and it sounded crazy, but he got it through because of redesign. The redesign mentality, those schools that have been redesigned, this didn't throw us off our game because we live in a world of shifting and changing. But that guy right there, he felt empowered. So I'm not sure what your role is with empowering those administrators to take a few things off our platter, to give them time to connect with their people because they have to put their heads on pillows at night knowing that their teachers are safe. Some are doing a wicked great job communicating and being very transparent with their teachers. I think that all of us could have a lesson in transparency because we're teachers, we're fixers, and we're planners. And if you're not filling our cup that way, we feel lost and then we fear. If you want the best out of educators, I'm going to be very honest with you. Just tell us what's happening. Give us our playbook. Give us things that we can do, and darn it, hold people accountable to give us what we need to stay safe. I believe in each of you on this board, whether you're my region or not. Let's be connected. But one thing I will tell you, I believe in this team right here, and I believe in Kansas admin. Give them the reins to make smart decisions for their people, their educators. We're the MVPs.
I had a quick something I wanted to add. Tabitha mentioned giving permission. And I'm on evaluation this year with a dozen other teachers in my building. And my principal said, we're not doing 3 goals, we're doing 1. Just focus on 1 goal. And it sounds really simple, but it really made that plate a little bit more manageable. And that's a simple thing I think administrators could do to teachers that are being evaluated this year.
Well, thank you guys. Those are great suggestions. We've got one more question, and then I think probably the commissioner would like to say a word or two. So Ben Jones.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You talk about the workload and everything going on, and the next agenda item I think will get more in my personal experience because I am a substitute teacher. I've been in the classroom 8 days already this year. It's been an adventure just as a sub.
Thank you for subbing.
Those kids are worth it every day. But I talked with administrators and even some teachers, and we have a profession that we expect perfection every day. And I know all of you have never had a bad day in the classroom, and you guys have never failed, right? But I don't know if you guys can speak to this about the ability to forgive ourselves for when we try something and it doesn't work. Because I think that's wearing on a lot of teachers I've talked to. They said, we just feel like we're failing every day, or this aspect isn't happening, or stuff like that, and trying to navigate that piece and that support. And that kind of goes in the mental health piece, I'm sure, but lightening the load on ourselves and stop applying the pressure to ourselves. And I'm a perfectionist too, so I get it, but yeah.
Ben, I'll jump in on this one. First of all, thank you for subbing. We appreciate that. Every building, every district needs subs, so thank you. I think the perfectionism does weigh on a lot of teachers. I know it does on me as well, but I think a lot of it comes from our admin. When we have admin in our district that say, is it safe enough to try? That to me gives me the grace and comfort to say, yes, it is. Because if I never try this and I never find success for a couple of my learners who have always struggled in the traditional setting, then I'll never know what works for them. And so when your admin give you the grace and kind of freedom to make choices and try new things and make mistakes, then I think that takes a lot of our plate and a lot of worries off our plate as well too. And really just sets up a classroom community and learning environment that allows for mistakes to happen in our classroom, because I think students feel that pressure too. More and more we see our students succumbing to those pressures academically or athletically. And so if we say, hey, wow, I made a mistake, let me share with you what I did wrong and what I learned from it, I think that's what's powerful, because then that trickles all the way down through our whole entire school system.
Well, thank you guys. Just incredible information for us, feedback, and your charges. Again, like I say, I've got them written down. I'm going to ask the commissioner. He may have a thing or two he'd like to say before we close out.
Well, it's great to see all of you again. Like all of you, I miss being in the classroom with all of you. Julie, I did get to spend some time with Janet up in Baser, but we're spending more time with the central office and trying to stay out of the buildings because we do travel some, and we certainly don't want to put anyone at risk. But thank you for taking the time. This is, again, another imposition when you could be spending it with kids and families, right? And we ask you to come hang out with some other adults and talk about what we can do to help everyone get through this. So again, thank you. You all are outstanding, and I look forward to the time that, as the chair said, that we can see you in person and have you in here. Thanks.
Thanks again, and on behalf of the board, we're going to take your charges seriously. I've already been thinking about how we're going to move forward with those. I appreciate your time. I know we're taking all of you, except for maybe Tabitha, but you've got plenty to do. We're taking you away from your kiddos. So we appreciate you being willing to spend a little time with us. It's really good because we aren't in buildings as much as we'd like to be because of COVID, but it's really good for us to hear from you who are there all the time about your experiences and your needs and your needs of your colleagues. And so that's been extremely helpful. So thank you, and best of luck to you as we continue to go into October, November, and whatever the future holds for us. But thank you, and we do really look forward to actually seeing you back here with us so we can do some problem solving together. So thank you. Okay, board, we're going to take a little break. Let's come back about 10:45. Thank you. we're gonna, the commissioner's gonna do, he was gonna do a piece at 9:35, but we went ahead and stayed with micro-credentialing, so he's gonna do some opening remarks about supporting schools and families during the pandemic, and then we'll go into our discussion. So, Commissioner?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was just thinking, as all of us took that break, we're not dissimilar to the students. We need a little social time. There was lots of conversation going on and social events. So thanks for the teachers. I'm just going to try to bring this all together for you, give you kind of a snapshot that I've shared with superintendents, also shared with the Kansas Association of School Boards. But I think it will help us lead into discussion of how we help policy-wise navigate the changes over the next few months. So as you know, when we set this out, and you hear this still, that there were going to be 3 learning environments, and on-site, and we'll talk about these, hybrid and remote. And we thought we might be flowing back and forth into these all year long in some combination. So I'm going to lay out for you what we kind of see right now and what we continue to learn. But I think this is coming at parents and it's coming at school people in waves. And there's so much uncertainty, and every day there's greater uncertainty that gets created by this in the world of education. I'm sure it's in everyone's world. And so the first for parents was, well, we've just stopped school. All right, we've got a temporary stop. But if it's not going to be temporary, how am I going to go to work? How am I going to take care of things? And we'll talk about that. And then schools have had these from mask. Are we going to play sports? Are we going to be in school or not in school? You heard the teachers talk about the juggling of those schedules. So all of these have created some challenges. What we have been trying to get people, and I think we are there. I don't think we were at this stage a month ago, mid-September, which was we're probably going to be with this virus in some capacity through the rest of the school year. And I think we were operating under the assumption that at some point, it never was when, we're going to be back to normal, right? When we get to August, everything's going to be fine. Well, if we just get to the first 6 weeks, if we just get after Labor Day, if we just get the first 6 weeks or the first 9 weeks, and now you hear people talk, we just get to Thanksgiving or Christmas. That thinking, I think, has hampered our long-term look at this for the rest of the school year. And I've been encouraging school districts, look at this over the long term, because we've got to take care of several what look to be competing needs. And they're not, we're going to talk about that, but they seem to be competing needs that I think make it difficult. For example, remote was always intended to be a temporary situation that you might have to go into for a week or 2 weeks. And as just talking to Janet, the Kansas City board this week voted that they are not going to start to phase back in until January. So from March to January, they will have been out. And as we talk about that, it creates challenges because the system was never intended to be that long in remote. Now, I want to say this over and over and over. You've heard me say this on the webinars. I know many of you jump on. This is no one's fault, and we shouldn't be looking to blame people. I think that's too easy, but I think we have to take a look of the whole year. So here's what districts are currently facing. Remote and hybrid. When you're in remote and hybrid, it works really well for tapping down the number of cases of the virus, which is what it was intended to do. So when a district goes to hybrid or a district goes remote, it taps that down. Cases do go down in those environments, and they're primarily large districts. So Dina, in yours, the Manhattans, the Salinas, Blue Valleys, Shawnee Missions, large 4A to the 6A and multiple districts. Those are generally who have gone hybrid or remote. Learning's not as effective. The teachers will tell you that. Parents will tell you that. And parents become increasingly anxious about not doing this long term. All right, and I want to just pause there because of the things that COVID has really done, and there are hundreds, good and bad, that it's exposed about our system. Educators look at our system as an education delivery system. That's how they look at it. Educators look at that as an education delivery system. Michelle and other parents also look at it as an education delivery system, but what they have come to rely on for 100 years is a child custodial care issue too. Does that make sense? I can go to work, I know where my kid's going to be, they're in a safe environment. Oh, and yes, they're going to learn. So they look at it as both. And when that gets disrupted for a long time, the tension starts to happen when parents say, I can't do this, and my kid's not learning as well, and teachers are going, I can't do this, and kids aren't learning as well. Does that make sense? So these aren't people that are angry at each other. They're competing interest about how we've set up school and how it's evolved over time as, in many cases, both mom and dad are working. That's why I say the remote and hybrid's most likely not sustainable for an entire year. On the other side, on-site works really well for learning, and staff and students are generally happy. We'll talk about when they're not. And these are generally the small districts. You heard Sean talk about Wamego, and they're the small 4A to the 1A. But what we see there are schools and activities get disrupted because someone has a virus and then there's a big quarantine. And so what you see in the smaller districts, and this is what, since Sunday night to today, what I'm seeing are now people wanting to not quarantine and not care if you have the virus. Does that make sense? Why? Because I got to send my kids to school. Does that make sense? And I want them to play on Friday night. And by the way, what's starting to take place now in sports? Postseason competition, right? And so if I've trained my whole life in tennis and I have to be quarantined, I'm going to miss state tennis. And it's not like in the spring when we shut everything down because everyone played on the same field. This is playing out county by county, school district by school district. So I'm not sure that the model that we have there is sustainable for all year, where we just bring people back as we had it and we quarantine. So, this is our gating guidance criteria. And I can say this with the exception of Kansas City, Kansas. Every other private and public school system is not following this guidance. The minute that we went to yellow and orange and played football, the guidance would say don't do a high-risk sport. So that's not good or bad. It's just the guidance is not. Why is the guidance not being followed? Because I want you to understand, this is what's creating the tension in Kansas. It's because of those competing interests of parents saying, we've got to have a normal, meaning I need to go to work. I need my kid to learn. My kid's not social, emotionally, mentally good in this environment. And we have teachers saying, I'm tired, I can't do these multiple environments. You're asking me to change every day. And I don't know that it's safe, if we go just back and I've got 30 kids in the classroom. Shawnee Mission would be an example where pupil-teacher ratio is pretty high. So what you're now seeing is the movement of the gating criteria, and I get calls all the time. Well, Randy, what if we do this? You can do whatever you want. This is our guidance to you. But they'll say, well, we're thinking about altering it for today. And here's generally my response. You can do that at any time. It's guidance. But you're going to do it again in 2 weeks when the outcome doesn't meet what the reality is. Does that make sense? We're going to go through the cycle every few times because I still think we have a mentality that this is a short-term issue and we're just trying to get through the next cycle of it. So we say this all the time. This happens to be the CDC. I tried to look at a graphic that I thought made sense. The two keys are mask up and 6 feet. If you want to keep kids in school, keep the viral load low, and keep people safe. It's extremely difficult to do because our classrooms weren't set up to be at 6 feet. In fact, in the last decade, what have we done? Flexible seating. Let's bring couches in and soft places and make it a really great environment. It was. And now we got to bring desks back in. And I'm in a 800 square foot. Let's think about Wyandotte County. You know, if you go to Wyandotte High School, my guess is those classrooms are about 800 square feet, you know, built in the 1920s, or Topeka High. So how do I put 24 in there 6 feet? Well, you don't. So then it becomes really difficult. So we're trying to say, if you don't keep 6 feet, then what the guidance, the medical guidance, right, Dina, would be, then if I test positive and we've been hanging out for more than 10 minutes within 6 feet, we're going to ask you to quarantine for a 14-day period because the viral load can be contagious for 14 days. So we're trying to say, how do we do this effectively? And there are many ways, but it involves trying to be creative on how we can do both so that we can have school and we can ensure as much as you can safety, which is never 100%. Those that want to go remote could still go remote if they deem it not to be safe. It's really, really hard. But there are places doing it. We also, if you can cohort the group, you minimize those that have to then be quarantined. But that starts to rethink. So this is just, again, I thought a decent visual that I grabbed. Here's not 6 feet apart, but in this case, you're quarantining one classroom, where in a middle school or high school, if you're going between 7 or 8 classes, you could end up quarantining a lot. So this is what could happen. Chanute High School, just use these as examples. These aren't real examples. Someone on the football team, or someone's 2 or 3 kids test positive. The football team quarantines for 2 weeks. This happens, you know, has happened fairly frequently this year. But then you come to school, and the example on the right, if Chanute's in a 7 or 8 period day, those 3 kids that you just quarantined off the football, you know, tested positive, have been in 7 different classes for 50 minutes with some group of kids, and then you multiply that, and all of a sudden, the calls come to me, Randy, I just had 3 cases, I have to quarantine 78 kids. This is not sustainable. I agree, right? Our initial reaction is, let's change the rules. I'm not, which they can do, it's their rules. But now we're pitting, you see the limits going on at every county health, every school district. We have to change our thought process about how do we have school through the end of May 2021. That's where I think we have to go. So I think our discussion is, how do we support districts in being creative? Use, you know, we just talked about how maybe to use money. You heard the teachers talk about, well, Julie, I think, mentioned in Baser, they decided, well, we're going to hire some additional people to just do the remote people so we can take out that off the plate. How are we going to support long-term families that need to have kids in school? They need, by the way, no one disputes, right, that kids learn best when they're in school. There are a handful of kids that learn best remotely. There's no doubt about that. But the majority of kids learn best with a great teacher or great teachers. But please understand, when you get the phone calls or the emails, Jim Porter, I think, mentioned, you know, didn't used to get one a month, and now you get several a day. Everyone's looking to look to someone for solutions to the dilemma. No one is the enemy here. No one is trying to create situations that we want to be in, right? What we're trying to do is create in-person learning safely. And I don't think they're competing interests, but I think you have to think very carefully how you do that. And when you get in large systems, 20,000, 30,000 kids in a Olathe, it's really hard. That's why your 1A schools tend to be more in session, because they can spread out a little bit greater. So Madam Chair, I'd be happy to kind of talk about anything that you want to talk about, or just the discussion now that you'll have.
Okay, board members, we'll just have some conversation for about an hour. We've got about that much time as far as, any issues caused by the pandemic, the role of the state board, those kinds of things as far as how we move forward. We've already have gating criteria. Randy gave some examples of that. So as you have conversations, I'll ask when you have questions or comments, if you kind of keep it like we've done before, keep it at 2, and then we'll move on to somebody else. And if you have additional questions, we'll come back to you there. So as your name comes up, if you kind of make either 2 comments or 2 questions, and then we'll move to the next person and come back to you if you have additional.
And Madam Chair, if it's okay, I'll just stay here in case there are questions, but this is your discussion. And,
That's fine.
But
Absolutely fine. Michelle Dombrowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So what I guess we're trying to do is mitigate the virus. We have, and the risk. We want to keep kids in school in person because we know that learning is best. We talked about testing today, and the biggest concern I have are which tests, because there's 3 different tests. Are we testing, because coronavirus is going to show up on every one of them, because that's a cold, that's a common cold. So we have to be testing for COVID-19, which is a strain that came in 2019. So we have to be specifically testing for that, because that's the one we're most worried about, the one we know the least about, and the one that's it's obviously causing respiratory issues in some people. So the kids seem to be not getting sick. They might be getting the virus, but they're not getting sick. So how do we keep the kids learning with a positive? So we have positive cases, which we know right now with the threshold, at least in Johnson County, is set at 42, which is high. That's picking up all kinds of coronavirus type viruses. Are we picking up the right one? And that's my biggest concern. And then we're quarantining people. Like let's say Kathy comes back and has a positive, and shouldn't have to quarantine. He shouldn't have to quarantine because it's 10 minutes close proximity with that person for 10 minutes or more, and that's what I think we're doing, is we're quarantining unnecessarily without the test. And then you'll have a whole roster of a football team. You don't have your varsity practicing with the freshmen. They're on separate areas. They shouldn't have to all quarantine. Then we have situations where on that roster, we've got 2 kids that have never even been to one practice this year because they have a back injury or whatever injury they have going on. So I guess that's my biggest thing, and is the Department of Health, at least in Johnson County, is overwhelmed. They don't have enough contact tracers, so they don't have enough people asking the right questions. The people have to voluntarily give up the information anyway. They have to work with them on that. They don't have to give names or anything that they don't want to. You're all, obviously, if you've been asked to mandatorily quarantine at home, it has to be by a public health department person or a contact tracer that's been trained and certified to do that. And then they also have a hearing up to 72 hours if they've been asked to do that and stay home. So there are so many factors going on right now. And I've noticed, I think Fort Scott USD 234 just made some changes. If everybody's masked, they're not asking. I can read it to you. It just changed and came out on the 12th. So schools are doing what they can to get the kids back in, because mental health in Johnson County is huge. We have attempted suicides and suicides that have already taken place, and we have to figure out. I mean, everybody's essential. Children are essential. Healthcare workers, their quarantine is 7 days. That's it. So I don't know why if the healthcare workers are out there working, I think teachers are essential. I think people that are having to say, I have to go back to work, I can't be home. I think we need to look at everything. We need to look at what are hospital beds full of? Are they really sick with the COVID virus? Are they in there for other reasons? So we have to look at what are our hospitals beds full of? I mean, the ER in Mirlock full at Children's Mercy. So I think we have to look at everything. We have to ask those questions. We have to be asking the questions to not just keeping people safe. What does that mean, keeping people safe? I mean, keeping them safe from mental illness. I mean, we have to look at everything. And I think the biggest thing is, if we're testing people, and we just had a doctor speak at the town hall. If you had the virus, you have the highest immunity of anybody. You're immune to it right now. Especially if you had it within the last 90 days. Your immunity is very high because you've already had it. So we need to look at our numbers, who we're quarantining unnecessarily, testing. What's the test? Is it a high threshold on that? And we're picking up something that they had 4 weeks ago, 6 weeks ago, and they're no longer transmitting the virus. I just want to bring all those things because, like you said, no one's at fault, but we have to, we're basing closing schools down or not getting the kids in classroom on a what if when we're already losing staff members to suicide, we're already losing children to suicide. So I'm thinking we got to balance this out a little bit so we don't lose more unnecessarily when we're worried about something that may or may not even happen. And our survival rate on this is huge. Survival rate's very, very good of recovering from it, getting it, and maybe not even having a symptom. You have to be tested to even know if you even have it because you don't have a symptom of it. So I just wanted to throw those things out there. It's very long, but I'm talking to ER doctors that are on the front lines of this, and they're just, I mean, even RNs are saying, when someone says they have a case, I'm like, so? I mean, they're to that point, they're like, we're seeing it all the time, and we're able to mitigate this and keep the viruses down. We're seeing mental health surge, and a doctor said, and at Children's Mercy, in 13 years, she's never seen anything like it in 13 years. And so something, we got to give somewhere. We can't just base it on what ifs. We have to get the kids back and get them educated and get them in the classrooms.
Might just say, because I think everyone understands this, because of the 2016, House Bill 2016, the law that was written and signed, this all comes back to 105 counties having the authority, and then 286 school districts in the private systems. So this is really local. You're watching local control play out, and I know you get comments about why can't you do something about not having the local control. That's why I always, this isn't a joking time, but that's what we intentionally did with 2016, was ensure that local could make these decisions and not have, like we did in the spring, one closure. That's neither good or bad. That's just the reality that we're in. And that's why you see the tension of, well, Fort Scott did this, or someone did this, why can't we do that? And then there's competing interest in what people hear. And so I think that's really good, Michelle. Thanks for summarizing.
Randy, why don't you talk a little bit about your ongoing conversations with your medical group? I don't know what you call them, but your advisory group. Because I know you're having ongoing conversations about a number of, not specifically maybe Michelle's topics, but certainly ongoing topics.
Well, Craig Nineswander and I, so we have a Tuesday, Thursday standing 8:30 in the morning conversation. We're going to actually have an extra conversation with the epidemiologists and the medical people on Monday. What we're really talking about now is testing. We have the Abbott Antigen Testing in Kansas right now. So we've got that. We've got some pilot schools looking at that. We're looking at I just listen to them. They're looking at viral load over the 14 days. When is it really the highest? Could you test and get people back sooner? So they're looking at all those. But even with that, at some point, someone tests positive, the medical people are going to say there's some risk of spread, pick a time. Right now it's 72 hours. There's still going to be some point you're not going to be in school, all right? Or you're going to be possibly asked to stay at home because you've been exposed to a close contact. The way in which you, in my opinion, mitigate that is mask, we're 6 feet apart. So if I have the virus and don't know it, you don't have to quarantine. You don't have to interrupt your schooling. But I'm telling you, as someone that has a daughter that teaches middle school art, having 30 kids in her classroom, it's hard, right, Dina? Because we didn't set up for this. So you have tables where kids are working collaboratively and you're sharing art stuff when now you shouldn't be sharing. So these are really hard. We do have some districts, you know, we've got Halstead's going to talk tomorrow on the Zoom about some outdoor spaces that they've created through redesign and through COVID, where, of course, as long as the weather's good in Kansas, we can use some outdoor spaces. Heston, Kansas, as I think you know, used the Crosswinds Convention Center and 4 churches and have spread out and really, again, what does that do? Drops your viral load and keeps you in school. Fort Leavenworth, Janet and I were up there, and Keith and the staff, they also have done that. And then they've also done cohorting where the teachers move at the middle school and the kids stay in the same group again, so that because there's going to be a viral outbreak, the key is trying to keep it together. So that's why these are really difficult. I think we'll continue with our medical people, Madam Chair, to try to get better answers on the virus of how to move testing, how to test more. But if you look at the NFL, so the Titans, we were asking who won the game last night. So the NFL, Tennessee Titans had to cancel a game, but the NFL just reschedules. When a high school team cancels a game, it's just because the NFL's doing it as a system. We're doing it by 105 counties and 286 school districts. So if Salina cancels the game, they just miss the game. They try to because the season goes on. So that puts a lot of pressure then on families and kids saying, I don't want to miss. And so now we have kids and families say, well, then I'm not going to get tested. Or I'm going to go remote so I don't have to quarantine. I'm just telling you the reality of how this plays out. And so a long answer to what are we doing with the doctors and the medical people. But I'd say right now we're looking at testing and we're looking at quarantining. And they're looking at, are there ways that we could shorten that period down by a combination of those things?
Dina Horst has a question. Dina, or comment?
Thank you. Well, one of the things I remember us talking about, or you were talking with on some of the Zoom meetings with superintendents, you were talking about finding other locations, maybe reconfiguring classrooms and the use of them, using the gym as classroom, etc. I know you just mentioned 2 or 3 school districts that are actually operating in kind of that manner, but I wondered if any other areas have taken that seriously and started looking at trying some different ways or of reconfiguring their use of classroom space.
I think all school districts are taking a look at that. To to what extent, I don't know. We don't collect that data. I think I said this yesterday. Maybe Michelle asked that question.
I thought it might be anecdotal.
No, it is. No, because of the number of calls we get. But I think everyone's trying to do that to some extent. Cohort where they can, like lunchrooms and things, and use spaces. Topeka 501, in their elementary is lowered class size by asking everyone that could, to go back and teach and try to spread out. And that's a fairly large system, over 13,000 kids in Topeka. So there are people trying to do the best that they can. But what's happening in many school districts, they're just getting whiplashed. They're in constant turmoil. You see this, right, playing out. So board meeting to board meeting, decision to decision, lawsuit being filed by lawsuit. And when you're in that constant cycle, it makes long-term planning hard. It really does. But if we think about this long-term, there may have to be a break by some districts that are constantly in that to say, whoa, let's bring everyone to the table. Let's talk about this rationally, about these competing interests. Because again, teachers see this as a learning environment, but what we have disrupted is a way of life. schools are a way of life for which other things operate. And we've disrupted that to a great extent, you know.
And if I might, Madam Chair, I have one more question. I've had a concern about teachers and the length of time that they're spending, and their family lives are extremely disrupted. And that came to light pretty early, right after school had started. I had a number of emails from teachers, and I wondered, is there anything with time management that, I don't know that teachers will think I've got time to read anything like that, but do we have any short kind of suggestions that we can send out to superintendents, principals to share with their teachers whenever possible, so that maybe we can help with some of the time frames that really concerns me. And I've heard of a number of teachers who said, this was a choice of my life, but I can't live like this. And they're actively looking for something different. And all indications are they're some of our best teachers. So that's a major concern, that we'd lose them. So if you could share what maybe the department is thinking about doing at least. And I
So
think mental health is another thing
big
that
for
we
everyone,
need to deal with.
students, families, staff. So before I answer that, which we've got two major things. If you are, though, I think you heard this from the teachers, if you're constantly in an anxiety mode about what's my environment going to look like that I teach, trying to kind of learn something new isn't at the top of your plate. So I say that with all due respect of what we've done. We set out, and I say we, 1,000 people, gave navigating change, and we took the standards and collapsed them into competencies, into grade bands, and put them in STEAM to do just that. Take things off of your plate and go more essential. But because you're dealing with so much in and out and what's going on, not as many people as I would like are using that document. Some are, to a great extent, because that was what the intent was, hey, so if Janet is an English teacher and I'm a history teacher, we could team together to lighten the load, planning wise and everything else. And there's all the lessons already designed for us. So that was one. Second is we're getting ready to launch training on how to do really good online. We've been doing some of that, our consultants, but now it's going to be actually asynchronous, meaning you don't have to go to a workshop. You can just watch it online. Brad's been working on that. But what we find is they don't have time to go do those things. Because, as you said, I'm already spending 12 hours. I'll just look right now, because I tell you this all the time, no. But I'm surprised I have not received any text from my daughter today. Last night, right when we were having dinner, she texted 7 or 8 times, to some extent saying, I can't do this. She, as you know, pregnant, due November 19th. She's a perfectionist, so she wants it to be exactly right for kids, as Ben said. And she's finding, she can't find that sweet spot. And it changes it on her every Friday. That's no one's fault, right? She's looking for someone to blame and she's wanting a solution. But it's no one's fault. It's that we're caught in this cycle of everyone gets to do by county, and there's different rules. And so, Dina, we do have those two things, if you can encourage those. But I think what you'll find is that they're going to look at you and go, I don't have time to do that. So, and you know, what is easy to say is, well, we gave you that on July 10th, but that doesn't do any good. We're setting on October 14th, and we've got to find solutions going forward. So.
Janet Wall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to say something, and then I want to ask Randy a question. What I want to say is I would like to commend our districts. I think they've done a yeoman's job of trying to do everything possible to protect our staff and our students. I believe they've gone overboard, you know, on everything, the health and safety of the students and the staff. But our communities have not cooperated in many cases. And I think that's our problem, because our staff and our students leave the schools and they're out in the community. And the community are not wearing face masks, or they're not social distancing or whatever. So then the kids or the staff come back in. So I don't know how we handle the communities, but to me, that's our biggest challenge, is not the schools, because the schools are doing it right. I mean, I really have nothing but the greatest praise for our schools, but some of our communities are frankly not doing it right. So that's the comment I wanted to make. But the question is just a clarification, not a question, just a confirmation maybe. Our gating criteria, first of all, I wanted to say I got another email last night about our gating criteria, criticizing it. And I just would like you to say publicly one more time that this gating criteria was determined by health professionals and recommended by health professionals. And there are counties who have made different gating criteria, because I know we have 4 different levels. Some counties have 3, which is the one thing they can do. But I think that just simply needs to be stated so everyone can once again understand that. Thank you.
So I'll say 3 things about the gating criteria. It was developed by 4 groups of people: the Kansas pediatricians, Kansas family physicians, University of Kansas Medical Center, and KDHE, particularly the epidemiologists at KDHE. So that's who developed it. It was and it was given. That's one. Second, it's guidance. There's nothing that's mandatory in that. It's medical guidance, because by law, every county and every school district can do its local control. So they can do with it what they want. So I think those are the things that, you know, we need to make sure everyone understands. It was done by the medical. So when people call me, which happened yesterday at noon, so I can't give you different guidance. You're asking me to change our guidance. I can't do that, because that's what the medical people have given to us. You can do with it whatever you want. And in many cases they don't, well, I don't want to do whatever I want, but I don't like this, right? I mean, okay, but I can't. The law says you have local control. I understand right now you don't want to have local control. We've given you guidance. You don't like that guidance. So you see the anxiety then that everyone has. I think that those are just things, as we talk about it, I say this all the time, more so than even in the spring when we said it officially. We've got to give grace to everyone. People are just at the breaking point. Michelle talked about, we're at the breaking point. This is not an enemy versus enemy, but we're, and so acknowledging the hurt and the strain people are feeling, and then trying to work solutions at a time when the tsunami keeps hitting you, and as Dina said, finding time then to work out the long term. Janet?
Ann Mall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, I'm just listening to Janet's concern, Dina's concern about time management, but I don't think it's time management. They're just being asked to do 2 jobs, and you can't do that in 8 or 10 hours a day. Like if you're teaching hybrid and you've got, you have a class that doesn't have an online platform already built, then you've been asked to develop an online platform for your kids who aren't in front of you, while at the same time you're teaching the kids who are in front of you. It's not sustainable. But I'm wondering, I saw the thing about the Children's Cabinet having $40 million to offer in grants to community organizations who'd be willing to open up, take these kids who are either they're 2 days hybrid or fully remote and keep them all the time so they could be with other people and socializing, that kind of thing. Have you heard at all how that might be going, or is it just too early to tell if that's going to be an attractive option?
I do not know yet. I've not heard. I do know, and you know this, a lot of kudos to Auburn Washburn did that early on for staff, where they had, those kids had a place to go so that staff knew that. I think that was a church, if I remember right, that maybe they did. But I have not talked to Melissa Rooker about that in the last couple of days.
Because 40 million is a lot of money. That could take care of a lot of kids, but it looks like, well, it could go to, I don't know if it would be businesses too, or it looks just like organizations. But that could take care of a lot of at-risk kids.
I'm getting a text from, it's a good thing about being online, people. So let me see if I'm getting an answer about that, because Amanda's,
Looks like it could go to.
they're reaching out to Melissa to get an answer.
Oh,
on
okay.
that.
Because that looks like that could take care of a lot of kids, but somebody's going to have to jump on it really quick. The only other question I had is the big elephant in the room, I think, is the 1,116 hours, and people keep asking me, why aren't we doing something about that? And I know we've said, well, we'll talk about it in January, but if people need relief now, why aren't we talking about that now? If we have the authority, while we're in an emergency situation, to address those hours, why aren't we doing it?
Well, we certainly can. I don't know what to bring you as solutions right now because the environment changes so frequently. So, because you're gonna have to make some, unless you're just gonna waive it entirely, which I guess you could do, but I don't know, the people, most of you that I've talked to don't want to do that. So is it 2 days, 5 days? What happens in the flu season? What happens in the weather? That's why I thought maybe when we get a little bit further down the road, we could have that conversation where it looks like how much damage has been done and needs to be relieved. What I've told people is if you need to take some time off right now and you don't have it because you front loaded all your PD, take the time off. We'll worry about those other things later on.
Well, why can't we discuss that now? Maybe if, like I said, they've already used the PD up, but they need more time for teachers to do this preparation, to develop these other curricula. Why don't we give them some minor relief at this time to say, okay, you can have 5 more days PD or whatever?
I would suggest if we're going to do that, we ask the commissioner to bring us some options to look at as far as the restriction, because I think we really need to look at the hours,
Mm-hmm.
you know, the total hours, but we need to look at some options and just from the departments and
Right,
recommendations from the
but if we don't
department.
start talking about it till January, it'll be March before we get anything done, and we're done. We need to be talking about now what's realistic to do and get a plan together maybe by next month.
Well, and I think we could request the commissioner to bring us, to take a look at that and bring us some options to talk about. You know, when we look at all of this, and I look at this, and most of my school districts are either, we have the lower grades in person, we're doing a lot of remote and some hybrid. And I haven't been into too many schools just because of COVID. But, you know, I think those folks doing hybrid, to me, that's got to be one of the harder things, because you've got a group of kids you're working with here, and you've got a group of kids you're working with here. But some school districts have hired people specifically to work with the kids who are remote on hybrid. Some folks don't have.
You saw that with Melissa today from Shawnee Mission.
Right. Some folks have not, first of all, they don't have the people to do that, but some folks have tried to alleviate some of the hybrid concerns with designating some certain people to be that. But I think we could specifically ask the commissioner to take a look at the hours and bring us some options to look at our November meeting. I don't know if we decide on anything then, but at least we'll begin to look at some options. So I think that's certainly doable.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair.
Ben Jones?
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is going to be probably more of a statement, and actually, right now, I've got an email right in front of me regarding, gating criteria in a county that is probably going. Well, I know one district's going remote for sure in that county, starting Monday, and everybody else in that county is trying to figure out how they're going to navigate it right now. And this, and everybody's working hard. I can tell you there's a lot going on, and there's the planning phase. There's trying to figure out the curriculum. I talked to elementary teacher, my fifth grade teacher, who I had in fifth grade. She's still teaching fifth grade. And I was visiting with her the other day, and she's got three permanent remote learners that families decided to do remote. They're in the districts in person still, but and she said the amount of hours it's added to her day is immense. She's doing 10 to 12-hour days, Monday through Friday, plus 10 hours on the weekends. Whether it's 5 hours Saturday and Sunday or 10 hours on one day, just to prepare for all of that. During the day, we're having to clean a classroom once an hour. Sanitize hands upon entering the classroom. At the secondary level, what I've had to do, sanitize kids when they walk in the door, clean all the chairs, take care of a lot of cleaning that goes on, stuff that we've never had to do before as educators. And on top of that, to echo the vice chair's voice, deal with all the criticism that comes along with it from the community that isn't in there. And that is almost too much. Because even though the community means well, the parents mean well, it's not coming across as, oh, we still love you. It's coming across, how dare you? And I've dealt with it from both sides. I've had those parents that think the virus is a figment of the imagination, that this virus doesn't exist, that it's made up. And I've dealt with those parents of, how dare you make my kid go to school? I've dealt with both ends, back-to-back days, and sometimes even within the same hour. It's a lot on their plates. I've dealt with it. I know we've all dealt with it as board members, but I'm in that, being in the school, physically in the school for 8 hours with the kids, in the secretary's in the building office with teachers sitting there just exhausted to the point of tears. It's exhausting, and I think we as a board, and I need to be very aware of what we say and what we do and what actions we take to support educators, to support those people. Because we're being asked by health departments to do this stuff. We're not health experts, we're education experts first. But yet we're trying to make all of these health decisions that we just get guidance from our county health departments. Well, our county health departments change across county lines. And that's been frustrating. I've got 15 counties in my district. I have 15 different health policies, 15 different quarantine policies. When I have parents reach out to me, I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's their policy? It's even hard from my standpoint, trying to say, okay, the quarantine period for Rice County, of which I live, is completely different than Reno County, which is not that far from me. It's been challenging, and to not have we're a local control state, but the frustrating part is the health departments not being consistent across the state. And I know we have rural counties and we have urban counties, and there needs to be some fluctuation, but it's all over the map. It's not just some, it's wide. It's very wide. And we have to remember that we're educators first, and there's not a single person that's sitting behind this dais, standing at the podium or in a classroom, doesn't care about every kid in their classroom or a virtual classroom, whatever it may be. There isn't a single one that doesn't care about their kids. I remember, Commissioner Watson, you made a statement. This is before COVID-19. It might have been, I don't even remember what it was. It said educators are the weirdest people on the planet because they don't only care for their own kids, but they care about other people's kids, sometimes more than their own, and do a lot more for their kids. They're spending a lot of extra time away from their own families, working very hard to do this. And I appreciate all the work that everybody's doing, including my fellow board members. We all care. We all want the best for Kansas kids. And together, we can lead the world in the success of each student. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Michelle Dombrowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Ben, for that. I think it's important that, I mean, I'm talking to teachers all the time, and they're stressed out. They're working 12 hours, and then about half the kids turning in the assignments, and then they're trying to figure out why they didn't turn in the assignments. It's happening, and it's hard because they're home, and we hope that they're being supervised, but their parents are working. So they might sign a contract that says, yeah, I'll try to do my best if we go remote, that I'll be there to supervise them, but a lot of them are figuring out that they have to have other parents in the neighborhood helping them out so that there is supervision going on there. I have two that have been on, they're finally back in the classrooms hybrid, a couple days a week. They've been online. They get off, they're online for an hour, almost an hour and a half. Some of these classes are an hour and a half, 90-minute classes, and they have about 3 minutes to get to the next one. And then they have assignments given in almost every one of those classes. Sometimes it's 2 and 3. And we talked about how the remote and hybrid was supposed to be, do a group projects, collaborate with others. It's mostly just figure it out on your own, teach yourself, especially for the older ones, 11th grade. He's teaching himself math. So they're on all day, and then they have about a 20-minute break, and they're doing assignments during their lunch period, and then they're coming down to the kitchen, eating, then going back to class and working on assignments because maybe they have a cross country or football. Then they go home and they come back home and they're back online again working on those assignments. So they're on the computer all day. And I'm sure the teachers are on there trying to figure out those assignments all day. So they're on there with them on a Zoom, and they're doing the same thing. So the remote and hybrid it's been challenging. I will say that just from having two in the house, and we're all trying to figure out Wi-Fi and making it work because my husband's working in the basement. I'm working on stuff from home sometimes, and 2 online, and we're all trying to find quiet spots. You're supposed to be quiet, and dogs bark. I mean, it's challenging. I'll just let you all know that it's challenging for the kids. It's challenging for the teachers. It's mentally challenging that you get headaches from being online and Zooming all day and trying to figure out your class. So I don't know what the answer is on that. I do know that we need to look at the virus itself and figure out, again, who is contagious and who isn't, and go back to what we do with other viruses as far as strep throat and everything else. If you have a fever and you have symptoms and you are sick, those are the ones that we can keep out of the schools. But if you just were around somebody maybe that had the virus, we got to stop that. I mean, we got to figure it out, and we got to do tests because we are unnecessarily keeping people in their homes, and it is mentally wearing on everyone. And it's unnecessary, in my opinion. I mean, you might talk about comorbidities and this risk and that risk, but I'm looking at the survival rate every single day. Every week it comes out. Hospitalization rates are not up in most counties, and if they are, we better look at what else is going on with that, because a lot of times it's mental health. And I'll just say that it's been wearing on everybody. It's like Ben said, it's wearing on the teachers, it's wearing on the families, it's wearing on the kids. And I'm trying to advocate for the kids right now because we've lost fourth quarter and now we've lost first quarter for most of these kids. They're not getting the education that they deserve. Thank you.
I'm going to follow up on a little bit of what Michelle said before I turn to Jim. On the folks, whether it's hybrid and they're on the computer or whether it's remote, because I feel like I've heard you say this, Randy, the expectation is that we don't have kids sitting on the computer 7 hours a day. That the expectation is that they're learning, so the teacher could give an assignment and the kid could go do that assignment and then get back. I mean, aren't there, and shouldn't there be some activities? I mean, I was sitting there thinking, okay, if I was teaching now, I'd be doing different brain breaks and different kinds of things where kids are getting up. I don't sit well even in these meetings this long. So I'd be doing aren't those things fine to do? I guess I want to ask that, but then I'll turn to Jim Border.
Yes, they're fine to do. We're a locally controlled state. So yes, I mean, and those things are happening. Not everywhere, but they are. Jan and I were again in a district, we were talking about snow days. They said, well, but on snow days, we all go to Suicide Hill and go sledding. Remember that, Janet? I said, there's 45 minutes of PE for an innovative teacher, right? I mean, so that's causing us to think different, but I'll come back. It's hard to think different when you're being consumed, right? Even families, Michelle, when you're being consumed about the immediate, right? That's what's hard for us right now. We're consumed about the immediate.
Okay, Jim Porter.
I wasn't gonna say that my granddaughter's full-time remote. She is not on the computer. It's being done, I think, extremely well. She's not on the computer all day long. She has all sorts of different activities, but she's engaged 6 or 7 hours a day. That's not what I intended. This is just a question for consideration, based on following up something that Ann said. Right now, professional development gets half credit toward the 1,116 hours. Do we have the authority to give full credit for that? And if you don't know, that's okay.
Interesting you bring that up because in my superintendent's advisory group, that was one of the things recommended to look at. It is in statute. It's been there forever. So the short answer is I don't know, because the statute as it's written is very difficult to understand. And we're trying to get some legal people to give us some advice as to what it is. We've interpreted it for a long, long time as you could count it as halftime. But that's one of the things we're researching.
Ann Mall.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, Kathy, I think what you were talking about is what would be ideal, but for one thing, elementary is totally different than secondary. I mean, if you have a contained classroom and that one group of kids all day long, you know what I mean? You could say tomorrow, do this, and it's different if you're synchronous versus asynchronous. And if you're in high school and you're hybrid, then, and your curriculum last year was built for everybody there in person every day, you didn't have a whole stack of activities sitting on the side ready to go for remote, you know what I mean? They're having to create this every day. That's why they're working 12 hours. So yeah, it'd be great to say, yeah, you could design this and the kids could have all that, but, you know, time away and this and that and all this other creative stuff. But when did we give teachers time to create that? You know, some schools brought teachers in, you know, a week or 10 days ahead and let them start working on that, but that wasn't enough to sustain them for all these extra creative things the whole year. We've got to give more time to do that if we're going to leave them in this situation. Thank you.
Okay, we have a question from Jean Clifford.
I just had a question about, in looking at some things that we can control, I was wondering if we had looked at all of the departments' reporting requirements for our districts and requests for information and tried to pare down as much as possible what we need from them so that it hopefully would reduce some additional work or anxiety at the district level. That was just the nature of the question. I just think it would maybe make it a little bit easier for districts to concentrate on the day-to-day things that they're dealing with.
Thank you, Jean. Jim McNeese.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Can you hear me? Thank you. Wow, good to see you all move. Hey, I thank you to all of the board for their comments and insight into the challenges that we face. But I think we're kind of at a position where I'd recommend we establish some kind of work group to explore options to redefine time and alternatives to the challenges that we're discussing at this time. We pretty much have cleared the, or not cleared, but defined what we see as the problem. Let's see if we can't come back in November with some recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Okay, I've tried to take a few notes here of kind of summarize some of the suggestions, I think, from the collective group as far as some feedback from Commissioner. One has to do with the testing and some medically related, which I think you're working on. So as your medical group continues to work as far as how the testing, when we get testing, if we can get testing into schools, and then also as far as the quarantining piece, updates on that information. And then you've talked a little bit, you said there have been 27, I was going to talk about the Children's Cabinet grants. So if you could get us some additional information, I think the deadline's coming up fairly soon, or maybe it's already passed, I'm not certain. But as far as the opportunities for folks to have assistance, various districts to have assistance as far as that custodial issue with their students. And then the required hours, the 11:16 on the hours, some options. Both Ann and now Jim McNeese have kind of talked about bringing some options back to us to look at the requirement of the 1,116 hours. Included in that is the professional development piece. I know right now it's interpreted as being counted for half days. Is there any way to count that for full days? And then maybe clearly defined, I think you have, but maybe we need something in writing as to what constitutes, and I don't know, you know, it's, most people do a 7 or a 7.5 hour day. That varies depending upon, but what constitutes the fact that kids don't have to sit in front of a computer for X number of hours a day. They can do some alternative things. And then Jean asked about if there was a way, I know we have done some, we've just did some work at this particular meeting as far as KISA, extended that for the whole year, but are there some other reporting requirements from districts that could be eased this year that would help the districts? So those were my notes that I took. Board members, if I've missed something, please let me know. But that was the ones that I took as far as getting some feedback from the department. Okay. Okay, Randy, thank you for taking us through this. You know, we've had a lot of different comments about, you know, we know that this has been difficult. We know our teachers are working very hard. Our parents are dealing with kids being at home and full-time, part-time, or in school full-time. So we've all got all sorts of different things going on now. I think as we continue to think about, and I think somebody said it, you know, providing grace. I know that's difficult. Janet Waugh expressed it much better than I. Wear your masks, stay 6 feet apart, support keeping the community spread down so our kids can be in school. I'll just reiterate, she said it much better than I. So we continue to do that. So, but as we continue to thank our teachers, our folks in our buildings for the hard work they're doing, our students that are having to endure some unusual times. Our students can be pretty resilient, and we ask that we continue to keep helping support the resiliency of our children and our teachers. With that being said, our meeting for October is adjourned. Thank you very much.